worried in terms of other countries coming out, and they don't want the UK to thrive when they come out on their own, because other countries will look the same, and that's the end of Europe. So we don't really know what's going to happen, but they don't want to make it easy for the UK, and they want to put as many obstacles as they possibly can. I mean, they even brought Gibraltar up as one of the negotiating factors ages ago.
Oh, you know what that is?
And it's got nothing to do with them.
That's they're also someone else is advising with psychology, because that's called anchoring. So what you do is you anchor your opponent with a ludicrous offer, because then you'll adjust the opponent's mindset to around the area of that offer.
Yeah, and the UK aren't playing ball with that, because it's got nothing to do with them.
So that's the genius of no deal is better than a bad deal.
So we may walk away with no deal. So we may have to fly straight to bypass Europe if they don't let our planes land, or whatever ludicrous thing. There could even be a shutdown of the Eurostar apparently at some point.
I think all of that is complete scaremongering. I think all you have to do is look at economic cycles, and the pound is now at a low cycle, and it's due for an upcycle, and all that's going to happen is you've got all the scaremongering now just to finish off the downswing of the low cycle. Then it'll come. The news will come out. Things are sorted or not, and then the pound will start cycling up again.
Well, I don't know enough about the economics of what's going to happen, because this is almost unprecedented in terms of in the direction we're going to. So it's
But you see, if you look at the
non-known
charts,
territory,
if you look at the economic charts and the currency charts, you can see over the years, over the months, just fairly smooth swings up and down. And at the extremes, of course, the moves are a little bit more abrupt, because it is moving from an extreme. But that's all it is. The economics, as they call it, the fundamentals, are actually fairly irrelevant, because the market will always find a reason for the move it does, and sometimes the move is even opposite to the reason. So sometimes you can have a fall in something even when there's good news, and then the pundits explain it by saying, well, that's because it was priced in before the news and the experts had already bought and now are selling. So I don't think that the news is always an excuse, and the news is simply preparing people, because you see when
worst
something
case scenario,
rises,
really.
The thing is, when something rises, someone's got to be selling. So what they're trying to do is to anchor everyone's mindset now, so that there's enough amateurs who are ready to sell, whereas in fact the clever people are going to start buying, and that's called institutional accumulation.
Do you want to expand on that one?
It's simply when the big boys start buying, they have to do it very carefully. So they don't just start buying helter skelter. They buy in little packets, so that what you'll notice when something falls, when the price of something falls, say the pound against the dollar, the pound will drop, reach a low, then it'll pop up, and at the same time there's still going to be quite bad news coming out, and in fact catastrophic news, and saying, well, the pound could do this. So there's enough people trying to sell, but then the institutions start buying in little packets. So instead of continue to fall, it then plateaus, and some people call that a bear flag, because they're thinking it's getting ready to fall again. But eventually all the bad news fizzles out, and the institutions are continuing to buy, and suddenly the pound starts shooting up,
Which becomes a bull.
and then it starts a bull move. Yep.
Okay, so well, as I said, I'm uncertain. I don't think it's going to be easy for the next few months. Actually, I think the UK could probably potentially be in for a hard time. And I mean, if you want to think about going back to the States, we are obliterating, or some people here are obliterating the relationship with Trump. I mean, if you don't like him, that's fine, but you're going to have to learn to deal with him, because he is probably the biggest leverage that we actually have right now. Now, he'll do everything that's in the best interest of America, but he, in some ways, I still consider myself. I still wonder whether he still considers himself half British because his mother was Scottish.
I mean, he's a major landowner in Scotland, isn't he?
All right.
Whichever way you look at it.
So he's an interest.
That's right.
Interest to actually make. Well, he owns a golf course. Let's say a major landowner.
But you know how much that's worth. You know how much
I
it's
don't
worth.
actually.
I think my estimate is about £160 million.
But he wasn't very impressed when they actually built those wind farms just off his golf course, which just ruined the total landscape. So he wasn't a happy bunny about that. But but we're going to have to learn to deal with him. And I even said it ages ago when Boris made fun of him about the only thing worse about New York is Donald Trump and things like this. He wasn't doing himself any favours, and that doesn't make him prime ministerial is the best way I can do it. It doesn't show qualities of a prime minister.
Doesn't matter. It's raising his profile, and that's all he needs to do until the race gets serious.
Well, but I think he was just shooting the gun beforehand because he didn't believe that Donald Trump would get in, and no one did. And all these pundits and political pundits who actually make these assumptions and they get it so wrong. And if they're getting that wrong, what else are they getting wrong? Because they're so off base.
Professional investors, a professional analyst giving economic advice, they found that his best advice is no more accurate than a chimpanzee giving advice on the stock market.
How did they quantify that?
They literally, I think they did the study and they got the chimpanzee to choose between coloured balls, and then they looked at their actual performance.
There's a difference between sort of taking a calculated risk and actually, taking the laws of probability into account.
But that's right, and what they're saying is that these pundits with their supposed expertise did no better than a chimpanzee using the laws of probability.
I mean, it's like going to a casino and actually saying, going on the roulette table and choosing red, black. At some point, if you keep on guessing like that, you are going to lose it all.
Well, one of the
you're doubling up, and you lose it all, which is what happened to that Barings Bank with Nick Leeson. He just kept on doubling up.
Correct, and that's called Martingale Trading.
Right.
Martingale Trading is exactly that if a position goes against you, you double up, hoping that a small move back in your direction will get you your money back, and if it still goes against you, you double up on the double. But you can imagine that pretty soon you'll end up having to have an enormous account to be able to double up. And that's why these guys eventually go bust. But what's more worrying is that what their Martingale style trading is what bankers do all the time. They just never get into trouble because the banks have such deep pockets that eventually it comes back.
Unless you get caught in your Nick Leeson or that guy. Who was the guy who got caught in, was it Paris?
There's two. There's USB, a Nigerian gentleman, UBS, I think, and then there was one for Hambros. An Italian guy.
So eventually, if you run out of funds, you are screwed.
The best book on trading the markets that was ever written was written in 1898, called The Game in Wall Street by someone called Hoyle, Hoyle, and everyone should read it if they're interested in trading. You can look it up on Google. They scanned it as a PDF, and you can see its gnarled edges of the pages. And essentially what he says is the market is controlled by pools of money, and these pools can never lose. And therefore you can be an expert in fundamentals, which is economic cycles. You could be an expert in statistics, which is the technicals, but you will lose unless you learn to follow the big boys.
Yeah. I was watching, there was a film, I watched it years ago. It was with Leonardo DiCaprio, and he played the Wolf of Wall Street. I can't remember the guy's name now off the top of my head. Obviously I don't care enough about him to remember. But
Michael Douglas. Michael Douglas was the...
No. That was Wall Street. The Wolf of Wall Street was the guy who was selling penny shares. Basically,
yes.
Yes. And he basically just scamming everybody in terms of...
Pushing the value up artificially.
Yeah, absolutely. And he... he went to prison, and they did a film on him about the Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio, and then he started launching his own motivational. He was already studying this motivational speaking, and the thing is, after the film came out, he was here a few times, and I was getting the emails like, go and see, I can't remember his name, for the life of God. And anyway, so he was coming over here, and these were how much the ticket, and people were clamouring to see him, and I thought, I've got no interest. At the end of the day, he's just a crook who got caught.
But you know what? Thank you for that. Thanks for raising it, because both he and Nick Leeson have they have two things that are comparable. One is everyone wants to speak to them because they are such high profile. Two, they are both complete psychopaths. Because they accept no responsibility. You can see no empathy within their eyes. Two exceptionally unpleasant people. But the only thing that, to their credit, is they're open about it. Both of them will say, "Well, if people want to hire me, I'll grab the opportunity with both hands." So that does give them a tiny, tiny bit of credibility.
Well, credibility in what? And how to be a crook.
On what they're doing now in terms of people talking about it.
You play that, but the thing is, it's because the opportunity isn't there. At the end of the day, you're still out making money, telling people a story, and some people are buying into it. But the thing is, although I can't remember, he's not around. I mean, I haven't seen his email around here for ages, and I don't think he's in the UK much now, if at all, because I think once you've seen him and the novelty's worn off, that's it. He hasn't really got much to offer, other than the fact that he had a story. And that's the problem with a lot of these big names, some of these big name speakers who go on these stages for 100,000 a pop. They've had one good story in their life, and they've been milking that. And I'm fascinated by the herd mentality of people. And at the same time, when it comes to voting, it's this herd mentality of picking someone based on what you see on such a superficial level. It's got nothing to do with the policies. I mean, it happened in the States. There were these interviewers going around, and they were telling people about, these are Obama's policies. Because actually, they're Trump's. After they've slagged off Trump, these are Trump's. They did it vice versa. It goes, what do you think about Trump said this? Well, actually, this was Obama's. And they look, but people just follow who they like the look of. And fine, it's what makes you marketable, but it doesn't make you necessarily the right person for the job. So, going back to Boris, he could very well be the right person. But the problem is, you come across against someone who's a little bit more charismatic, he will win. David Cameron, I'll give you an example. David Cameron, when he went up against Ed Miliband, when he went up the first time against Brown. God, what's his name?
Gordon Brown.
Now, Gordon Brown's got no personality. He never got elected. He was a cantankerous old git, really. And you've got someone like David Cameron, who was a little bit more charismatic, and he came in and wiped the floor with him. And again, when he went up against Ed Miliband's got a slight speech impediment, all right, which went against him. They both same heights. They both fit the optimum look of a politician. Full head of hair, tall, slim. They look like leaders. Very well crafted, very well cut. But Ed Miliband had a speech impediment, and David Cameron was a lot more aggressive. He wanted it a lot more, and that's where Theresa May's fallen down. She came across as very robotic in terms of how she came across.
So he was being assertive. Remember what we said? Assertiveness and
came across as assertive. Well, it's marketable. And if you want to talk about Trump again, when you put him up against someone like Hillary Clinton, he came across as strong. He came across as a leader. But on a psychological level, people have seen him as a leader for years, whether you liked him or not. And he's done The Apprentice. He's sitting in that chair at the top, at the middle of the table, surrounded by all these people. You're fired, giving all these decisions. On a psychological level, you can't help but see him as a leadership role.
Well, that primes your system one. So
it does prime your system, yes.
A system one, because as according to Daniel Kahneman, there's two systems by which we make decisions. System one is our instinctual, emotional one, and system two is our logical one. But we always go for the line of least resistance. Our logic requires effort, so we try and avoid that. And so as long as we don't see anything too catastrophic in our impression, we always go with our emotion. And what's shocking is that this can be primed by any sorts of stuff. And our ability to override it if we're stressed. So, for instance, if you're unhappy about something, if you're angry, irritated, your system 2 goes down. It literally goes down and out. So your ability to rationalize is zero.
Well, once your emotions go up, your intelligence goes low.
That's it.
It's, as soon as you get the amygdala hijacked. Yeah, absolutely.
It's why people in happy marriages very rarely do well at work. And it's why when they get out of their marriage, then they fly like eagles.
Well, that's because it impacts so many things. People say we specialise in a certain area or whatever, but so many areas are interlinked into all these things. I mean, if you're happier, you're going to produce better. If you sleep, you're going to be more productive. If you feel more significant, which means you've got more serotonin, you're going to